Yesterday was the hands-on event for the Nintendo Switch 2, where different content creators got to experience the Switch 2 in person. And being the extremely famous YouTuber I am, I sent Nintendo an email asking to go, and to my surprise, they actually responded. But what they said is not what I was expecting. They replied with a screenshot of a video I made 2 years ago showing how to get free Nintendo Switch games that they later took down and struck my channel for. So as you can see, I'm not at the event. So today, I'm going to react to the Switch 2 event and share my thoughts while doing so. I've never done a video like this before, so please let me know what you think about it in the comments. And as always, let's get started. I am so excited. So let's just sit back and watch this video and wish we could be like Austin Evans.
This is the brand new Switch 2.
Yes,
Nintendo invited me out to the launch event for the Switch 2 here in New York City. So let's go give this console a try.
Lucky.
So this is my first time getting hands-on with the Switch 2. The first thing that jumps out to me is the mechanism for the Joy-Con. It's loud in here, but listen to this click.
Oh, that's a really nice click. Okay, that is a really nice click. I'm pre-ordering a Switch 2 the second I'm able to, and I can't wait to test that click. That seems like it'd be so satisfying.
And the way the button kind of like kicks it out, do you see? When you sort of push the button, it like sort of detaches the Joy-Con a little bit, and you just naturally pull it apart. On top of that, when you actually have the Joy-Cons attached, it feels a little bit more sturdy. I always had a problem with the original Joy-Cons on the Switch. It just felt slightly wiggly.
Yes,
but with this,
yes, that is so true. I actually have the Switch right here because I wanted to talk about that. When you're holding this, you can get these to wiggle around so much, and it's so annoying to deal with. And if you have a really old Switch, you can probably just pop out your Joy-Cons without holding down the button like mine. Like, look at this. It just slides clean off. So hopefully the magnets on the Switch 2 definitely make it more sturdy.
Because you've got that sort of deep rail on the inside, it attaches pretty firmly. On top of that, I really like the kickstand. So it is fully adjustable. So it will stop at pretty much any sort of spot, almost flat, and then all the way up here.
That's kind of like the kickstand on the OLED, but I heard a lot of people say that they actually prefer the OLED kickstand than the Switch 2 one. But if you have a Switch OLED, comment down if you see an obvious difference compared to the Switch 2 one that would make the OLED one better, because I don't see why. It looks great to me.
So the kickstand is much more something like a surface. You'll also see down here is the micro SD Express card slot.
Nice.
You do have your dual USB-C, so you have one on the top as well as one on the bottom. The weight's also pretty nice. I was a little bit concerned about what it was gonna feel like when you have like, it's a much larger display, but my first impression is this still feels a lot more manageable than something like a Steam Deck or what have you. So I've just spent the last couple of hours playing with the Switch 2, and I have an enormous amount of first impressions.
Let's hear it.
So first and foremost, let's talk about the hardware.
That's what I'm excited to hear.
It's certainly a lot more manageable than something like a Steam Deck or any of the PC handhelds, which is nice because you look at the 8-inch screen, and I mean that's fairly large, but it's pretty comfortable. Now, the only time I was able to actually try it without like all the extra stuff on the back was one of the demo models that didn't actually play. So all of my gameplay was with like some big heavy chain on the back. So I can't speak to how well it's going to hold up when you're playing for hours and hours at a time.
Wow, that screen looks so nice. I don't know if it's its camera quality, but well, actually it's 1080p compared to 720p, so maybe that's it. And the Switch 2 doesn't have an OLED screen, so I'm comparing it to the normal LCD Switch, and it still looks really, really good. Dang. Why am I reacting to this? This is just making me want to hold the Switch 2 so badly, guys.
Hours at a time, but it feels reasonable. Again, an improvement over the other PC handhelds out there. Now, something else that I'm very impressed with are the Joy-Cons. I cannot underestimate how nice these Joy-Cons feel and how well engineered they are. I took them on and off a bunch of times. It is really, really nice.
Oh, okay. I already noticed this in the trailer, but the ZL and ZR buttons are gonna be way better than they are in the Switch. The ones on the Switch, you basically have to press with your fingernails if you want the click to register, but these ones look like actual buttons, so that's really nice. I mean, you're still not catching me playing a game with only one Joy-Con,
If Nintendo have done anything right with this hardware, the Joy-Cons are absolutely one of them. Speaking of the Joy-Cons, they're now taller. And boy, oh boy, does it make a big difference. I was playing some Mario Kart, and we had like the little grip, which by the way, the little Joy-Con grips actually have the ZR buttons on the back, the little programmable buttons, which I didn't even realize.
I did not know they would have that. That's really cool.
It's taller, and for someone with completely average sized hands, maybe slightly above average, some might say, it feels really comfy. Like, again, it's an improvement over the original Switch Joy-Cons.
That screen just looks so nice.
But the biggest improvement, and I'm gonna talk a lot about Joy-Cons because that's probably my favorite part of the Switch too, is the mouse mode.
Really? Honestly, when I heard the mouse mode, I thought it was gonna be a little gimmick thing that I would never use. But in the Switch 2 Direct, if you watched it, there was this wheelchair basketball game and it looked really, really fun. I'm not gonna lie. The game better not cost $80 though, all right? I will gladly pay $80 for Mario Kart World, even though that's way too much money. But if you charge me $80 for wheelchair basketball, Nintendo, we're gonna have some problems.
Now, the way this works is you can just use it by itself, but what you'll probably want to do is attach the little magnetic wrist strap.
Yeah, I forgot
because that
about
also
that.
has a couple of mouse skates on it. It is super cool to play with the mouse mode. So the first game I tried with it was Drag and Drive.
That's the
this
game I
one
was talking
I will say I was
about.
not a huge fan of because what you're doing is you're sort of pushing it like a wheelchair, right? So each one of the Joy-Cons is your right or your left wheel. It's a cool demo. My issue is that it's not a really comfortable grip because for the other games, you're just mousing, right? It's maybe not going to be as comfortable as a real mouse for extended periods, but you know, you're moving around, it's fairly standard. But with this, you're pushing backwards and forwards, right? And what I found was 5 minutes in, I was like feeling like fatigue on like the top of my shoulder. And like you've got this real claw grip.
That's true. That's a workout. Imagine having to do that for like 10 minutes. Yeah, I would not like that.
However, I was much more impressed playing something like Civ 7. So you can easily use the sticks when you hold them up. So both Joy-Cons understand when they're in mouse mode and when you pick them up. So specifically in Metroid Prime, your reticle changes. And what I was doing in Metroid was as I was moving around, I would pick it up sometimes, feel more comfortable use the sticks, then I would set it back down, use it as a mouse. It's really, really clever stuff.
That's
Something
cool.
like Civ, you
That's
actually can do
really
almost
cool.
everything just with a single Joy-Con. So if there's one takeaway that you should take with this Switch 2, the Joy-Cons are a huge step forward. The HD Rumble is also really impressive.
Oh yeah,
I was only able to play
HD
a couple
Rumble
of games,
2.
but it feels
That's what Nintendo
much more
said.
similar to something like the DualSense, the PS5, and that there's a lot of fidelity there. Those Joy-Cons are absolutely mint. I have no notes. So I'm about to play Cyberpunk, and something that's immediately jumped out to me, this is the Switch 2 Pro controller. I don't know what they're doing with the stick, but it's like such a smooth mechanism, especially when you're like routing it around.
Okay.
What are they doing with these sticks?
Okay.
Why do these sticks?
I want to know what they're doing with the sticks too. Why can I hold it? Why can I? I'd love to know what the Pro Controller feels like, Mr. Austin Evans, but unfortunately I can't. So I'm just stuck at home watching you and talking every 2 seconds so you don't take down my video.
I'm gonna play some Cyberpunk. So this is one of the games that is going to be natively supported on the Switch 2.
Nice.
So we're looking at 1080p, either 30 or 40 FPS.
It'd be cool if it could run at 60.
Now I was able to play a few games using the internal display. It is a 7.9 inch, 120 hertz HDR LCD.
I wonder why they didn't make it OLED. My guess is they're going to release an OLED version 2 years later. But if that's the reason, that's just really annoying because if you want to have a Switch 2, you want to get it now. You don't want to wait 2 years just for the OLED screen. But me personally, I don't really play Switch games in handheld mode, so having it be an LCD screen won't really affect me.
None of the demos that I tried had 120 hertz running on the internal display. I got to try 120 hertz with Metroid Prime on a TV.
Okay, that's
which
nice.
looks phenomenal, by the way. But as far as the actual display itself, it is a good display. It is not a great display. It's bright, but the contrast, especially the viewing angles, are just not as good as an OLED. All right, so let's talk about
Can't really do anything
graphics.
about
They've
that.
been kind of quiet on like tech specs, right? So I can't tell you it's got a quad-core processor, this many NVIDIA GPU cores. I know none of that. So all I can go on is what I've talked about with some of the developers here and sort of my own first impressions. I think this Switch 2 is more powerful than the Steam Deck. So specifically playing a game like Cyberpunk, which to be fair is playing a little bit of an older build.
Switch 2 more powerful than the Steam Deck?
Pretty well.
I mean, it should be. It's newer than the Steam Deck, but again, it's Nintendo. Like, I was coming in here thinking they'd release a console as powerful as a Wii U. I don't know. So to hear that it could be more powerful than a Steam Deck, that's awesome.
Playing a game like Cyberpunk, which to be fair is playing a little bit of an older build. It runs pretty well. Now the motion blur is a little bit strong. Some of the hair rendering is not quite there, but they were telling me that that's not a final build. It's like they've got a couple more months of sort of tweaking and tuning, so I can give a little bit of a pass. If I was to take a guess, I would say we're certainly below something like Series S or Series X or PS5 performance,
Yeah, for sure.
but it does feel like
Definitely.
it is a step up over what you're gonna get on the Steam Deck, at least when you're in docked mode. In portable mode, it might be a little bit closer. It's certainly using that new dock, which actually has a dedicated cooling fan to help cool the system off. And a game like Mario Kart, which has been entirely optimized for the Switch 2 hardware, looks and runs great. But surprise, surprise. I mean, Mario Kart looks great on the Wii U.
That's another thing I want to mention. So obviously the Switch 2 isn't going to be as powerful as the current gen consoles, the PS5, the Xbox Series S and X. But I feel like most people that are buying a Switch 2 are buying it for the Nintendo games. There is some awesome third-party games that are coming out on it, but most people probably only care about the Nintendo games. And because of that, I feel like it doesn't need to be as powerful as the current gen consoles, because all the Nintendo games, like Austin mentioned with Mario Kart, run great and they look amazing because they're optimized for the Switch 2. So to see that this console is honestly really powerful, even though it isn't up to the modern standards, it's just so cool. And I can't wait to see how beautiful the new first-party Nintendo games are gonna look on it.
So graphically, a little bit more impressive than I thought. Metroid was a game that ran at 120 FPS beautifully, smoothly. A lot of the other games are 30 FPS, but it's a mix, right? 30, 60, 120, clearly not on par with the PS5. No one should expect that, but quite solid. Battery life is an interesting one. The Switch 2 actually is a little bit of a downgrade here compared to the original Switch. So if you're comparing to the launch Switch, that was quoted at a minimum of 2.5 hours. And the red box Switch, the Switch Lite, especially the Switch OLED, are 3 hours plus. However, this is at a minimum of 2 hours.
That's odd. I was not expecting it to have worse battery life than the old Switch. The reasoning that I can think of is, well, yeah, it's more powerful, so it's going to consume more power, but then it's also bigger, so wouldn't they just put a bigger battery in it? But maybe Austin knows why. I want to know why it would have less battery than something from 8 years ago.
Now, to be fair, it's 2 to 6.5 hours, but realistically, you're probably going to be 2 to 3 hours of realistic battery life. Now, I will say that that's about what you're going to get from a Steam Deck. And also, it's clear they're pushing this chip pretty hard. I was playing handheld for like 15 minutes. The console was warm, not hot, not uncomfortable, and it's way too loud here to tell what the fan noise was. But if you're expecting great battery life, especially if you're coming from the original Switch, sorry. Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Oh, well. You know what, though? At least because it has 2 USB-C ports, one at the top, you can charge it while you're playing more easily. So I guess that makes up for it.
Pricing, and specifically games.
Oh boy, here we go.
So,
here we go.
The Switch 2 is going on sale for $450.
I mentioned in a live stream the other day that I actually don't mind the $450 price tag at all. I think that's a pretty fair price. I was hoping $400, but $450, I don't mind. What I do mind, we'll let him get to it, all right? Just listen.
$500, you want to get the bundle with Mario Kart. Before coming to this event, was very excited for the idea that they would go for $399. That's what I hoped for.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
$450. Yeah. I don't think it's incredibly unreasonable, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, it is still cheaper than something like a Steam Deck OLED. It also, I think, if we're speculating ahead, leaves room for either a price cut or realistically like a Switch Lite 2 to come in at something close to $300. So it's a lot of money. If you want to be patient, you can be patient. I don't think it's entirely unreasonable given how much they've done with the improvements to the Switch 2. The games are where this is a little more tricky because so traditionally Switch 2 games are like $60. There were a few that were 70, but brand new titles were generally $60
and never go on sale.
What we're seeing now is that the games have all moved up a tier or two. So games like Mario Kart, games like the new Kirby, like a number of the brand new Switch 2 games are $80. It's understandable given the
the inflation thing. The games back then are technically more than they are right now at the $80 price tag, but I don't care, okay? $80 for a game when I've been so used to 60 is a crazy price jump. And for Nintendo to be the ones doing it is not a good sign, because if any company's gonna get away with doing it, it's going to be Nintendo, because Nintendo has such good first-party games that if they charge $80 for Mario Kart, we're spending $80 on Mario Kart. And then all the other companies are going to be like, well, okay then. And then they're going to start charging $100. And then GTA 6 is going to cost $150.
Now, there is a little bit of a variety of prices. So some Switch games are going to be 70, some are going to be 60. It seems like kind of 80 is just sort of like the ceiling. Okay. I think this is going to be one of those things where it's an uncomfortable pill to swallow, but we're going to get used to it because all games are going to move up. And there is at least still some variety. It's hard to defend, if I'm honest with you. However, $80 games, I think, are here to stay and then some. Now, speaking of the actual games themselves, there's a lot of different ways you can play games on the Switch. By default, the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of Switch 1 games are just put the card in and it works. There are a few that have compatibility issues. Something like Labo doesn't work because you need the physical Switch 1 hardware for it. But generally speaking, most Switch 1 games just work. Same token, Switch 2 games also just work because they're meant for the Switch 2. But there's a third category of game called Switch 2.
Wait a minute, guys. Wait a minute. They gotta do what they did with the 3DS. They gotta put a little stick on the left or right side so that you can't put Switch 2 games inside the normal Switch. But I'm assuming that Nintendo would do something, and if they don't, you know that I'm making a short on what happens if you put a Switch 2 game inside a Nintendo Switch.
Switch 2 edition games are essentially Switch 1 games that have been updated to also run better on Switch 2. So some games, like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which definitely need the update, things like Super Mario Odyssey, 3D World, these are going to be getting free Switch 2 editions. So if you have the Switch 1 version, you've bought it digitally, physically, whatever the case is, you'll be able to just play it with the Switch 2 enhancements.
Nice. I did not know that, because in the Direct, they were talking about an upgrade pass, which I assume Austin's going to get to, but at least some of the games are a free upgrade. That's very, very good to hear.
A bunch of other games are going to require expansion packs or paid upgrades. I don't know how much these are going to be. The speculation,
Better not be over
$10.
$30. Oh,
maybe
okay.
15 or 20 though. I get it. I mean, some of these games are going to come with like additional like content, so it's not just like a graphics update. You know, you're gonna get like additional levels and stuff. So you can kind of think about it as DLC. And worst case scenario, you could just play the Switch 1 version.
True.
Now, one thing I am unsure of right now is what happens if you play a Switch 1 game that's not optimized on Switch 2, if you see any performance benefit. My gut is that yes, you probably will see some improvements in load time, and maybe if it's like an unlocked frame rate, it's closer to 30. But we're gonna have to actually get the Switch 2 into the studio and really try it to find out. Bottom line is this. The Switch 2 is a pretty major upgrade over the Switch 1. There's some questionable things here. I mean, you haven't even gotten into the fact that not all physical games are created equal. So some physical games just work, you plug it in and it goes. However, some physical games are actually just a license and you have to download the whole thing.
That's so stupid. That's not a physical game. If you buy a physical game card and all it does is download the thing onto your Switch, that's not a physical game. And I'm pretty sure that Nintendo is charging more to get that than to get the digital games. And Austin didn't talk about this, but for Mario Kart World at least, I don't know for other games, the digital version is $80, but then if you want the physical game cartridge, it's $90. Why is it $10 more? Companies that make third-party games for the Switch usually do that because, you know, it costs more to manufacture the cartridge, so I understand that if it's like a smaller third-party indie company doing it. But to have Nintendo, the creators of the console, the first-party game makers, charge more money to get a cartridge game, it feels like they're not doing that because it costs more. They're doing that because they don't want you to have physical games anymore. They want you to have digital games where they have control of whether you can play it or not. But with the physical games, they're making it so you just download the game anyway, so they basically do have control. So to make it cost more, it's just very disappointing, but oh well.
The fact that it's got 256 gigs of storage is nice, but games like Cyberpunk are gonna be 64 gigs, right? So you're gonna fill that up really quickly. You're going to want to take advantage of the microSD Express slot, which are a little expensive right now.
Yeah. Okay, so I was looking it up before this video. My 256 gigabyte micro SD card that I have in my normal Switch right now is $20. If I want to get that same version, but the micro SD Express version, and Express is the only ones that work in the Switch 2, you cannot use ones that aren't Express. Guess how much it costs? So $20 for the one I have. The Express version, $60, so triple the price. It's jolly. All right, let's finish out this video though.
The Switch 2 really is pretty much everything you would expect out of the sequel to the original Switch. Let's not forget that the Nintendo Switch is about to be one of the most, if not absolutely the most popular game console of all time. It's right behind the PS2 in all-time sales. It is tremendously successful, and in my opinion, PC handhelds like the Steam Deck would not exist if the Switch had not blazed that trail.
That's so true, I agree.
It is understandable that Nintendo played it pretty safe here. They took the existing Switch, they made it bigger, they gave it more performance, they improved the Joy-Cons quite a lot, and they've also increased the price. However, I will say that there are some real highlights with the Switch 2. The Joy-Cons, I cannot say enough nice things about. I don't want to overhype it, but between the magnetic mechanism, between the mouse mode, between the rumble, between the larger size, it's a huge improvement, at least for me personally.
And they just look so clean.
And the fact that the screen, while it's not OLED, is still 120 hertz. You've got the ability to go 4K out once you put it on the dock. That dock has a fan, which is going to help boost the performance.
That's great too.
There is a lot to like here, but make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring-a-ling that ding-a-ling button, because there's gonna be a whole lot more Switch 2 content coming soon.
Guys, you should listen to him, but do it for my channel, do it for my channel. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'd very much appreciate it. All that I have to say now is that I'm very excited for the Switch 2. The Joy-Cons look awesome. I really want to test out the mouse mode. I really want to hear how that magnetic thing sounds. I'm so hyped about a 120 hertz display. I was not expecting Nintendo to do that. When I was watching the Direct and they were talking about the display, I was there saying, please at least be 90 hertz, please at least be 90 hertz. And then they said said 120 FPS, and I was like, whoa. Let me know down below in the comments if you're excited for the Switch 2 and if you're gonna try to pre-order it. And thank you for watching this reaction video, and I'll see you guys later. More modding content coming soon, I promise.